In most empires, a royal birth meant joy. In the Ottoman Empire, it could mean someone would have to die. The year is the height of Sultan Suleiman's reign. His empire stretches across 3 continents, his word is law, and his harem is the most dangerous place in the world, not because of daggers in the dark, but because of what those daggers protect. And on this night, the palace is holding its breath. Hurrem Sultan, the Sultan's most trusted and most hated consort, has just given birth to a son, a healthy, perfect little prince. In any other court, this would be a celebration. But here, in the heart of the Ottoman dynasty, this is the opening move in a game that has only one rule. Only one prince can survive to rule. Ottoman succession didn't work like Europe's. There was no eldest son automatically becomes king. Instead, when a sultan died, his sons would fight for the throne, and when one won, the others were executed. The logic was simple: no rivals, no civil war. The reality? Every new prince was a potential target and a potential threat. So when Hurrem's baby's cry echoed through the palace, it wasn't just the lullaby of a newborn. It was the starting gun for a deadly race between brothers, some already grown, others still in cradles, each now one step closer to either the throne or the executioner's cord. And somewhere in the shadows of Topkapi Palace, whispers began. Whispers about alliances, betrayals, and the question that would haunt every corner of the empire: which prince would live, and which would have to die? Before we can understand why Hurrem's baby was so dangerous, we need to step inside the most powerful and most feared place in the Ottoman Empire, the imperial harem. The word harem often brings to mind images of luxury, silk cushions, and women in shimmering jewels. But in reality, the harem was a political war zone disguised in silk. Behind its gilded doors lived the sultan's wives, concubines, and female relatives, all under the watchful eyes of the eunuchs who reported directly to him. It was a world ruled not by armies, but by influence, whispers, and survival instincts sharper than any blade. And at the center of this world was Hurrem Sultan. Born in what is now Ukraine, Hurrem was captured by Crimean Tatars as a teenager and sold into slavery. She arrived in the Ottoman Empire as property, a girl with no name, no family, no future. But she had 2 things: wit and ambition. Within a few years, she rose higher than anyone thought possible, becoming not just the Sultan's favorite concubine, but his legal wife, something unheard of for centuries. But with that rise came enemies. In the Ottoman system, a concubine could only bear one son for the Sultan. This was to prevent any single woman from producing multiple heirs and dominating succession. Once her son grew old enough, she would be sent to govern a distant province with him, far from the palace, far from power. This system was designed to keep the harem in balance and the throne safe from a single faction's control. But Hurrem didn't follow the script. She had already given Suleiman multiple children, both sons and daughters, shattering tradition and shifting the palace's balance of power entirely in her favor. Now, with the birth of another son, the stakes exploded. Every woman in the harem with a prince of her own saw Hurrem's newborn as a direct threat to their child's survival. Because when Suleiman eventually died, his sons would not inherit peacefully. They would fight, and only one would be left alive. That meant more sons for Hurrem meant fewer chances for the others. This was the silent war of the harem. Every smile could hide a dagger, every gift could be poisoned. And tonight, Hurrem had just given her rivals the deadliest reason yet to want her, and her son gone. The harem was about to become a battlefield. News in the palace traveled faster than the wind. The moment the midwife whispered to her assistant, the harem knew. By the next sunrise, every corner of Topkapi Palace buzzed with the same dangerous rumor. Hurrem Sultan was pregnant again. For the women who shared Suleiman's past affections, the news was like ice water down their spines. Some gasped in disbelief. Others smiled politely in the corridors, but only with their lips, never their eyes. In the harem, joy for another woman's pregnancy was almost never genuine. The first to react were Mahidevran Sultan's loyal attendants. Mahidevran, mother of Prince Mustafa, the eldest son and heir apparent, knew exactly what another son from Hurrem could mean. Mustafa's claim to the throne was strong, almost unshakable. But if Hurrem's influence over the Sultan continued to grow, rules could bend, traditions could be ignored, and even Mustafa's destiny could be stolen. Elsewhere in the palace, other mothers of princes sat in stunned silence, calculating. In the Ottoman Empire, succession was not decided by age. There was no eldest wins policy. Instead, when a sultan died, his sons fought, often literally, until only one remained alive. It was a brutal tradition known as fratricide, and it meant that every new prince born was not a brother, but a future enemy. Even the court officials, men who never stepped foot inside the harem, felt the ripple. For the Grand Vizier and the viziers beneath him, the political equation shifted overnight. They knew that Hurrem's children, unlike the others, had a mother who dined with the sultan, who whispered to him in the privacy of their chambers, who could tilt his mood and decisions with a single word. A new prince from Hurrem would mean more than just another player in the succession game. It would mean another dagger pointed at the heart of every existing prince's mother. And in the harem, when a woman's son was in danger, she was capable of anything. From that moment, Hurrem's pregnancy was not a private matter. It was a political event. The whispers grew bolder in the bathhouses and corridors. If it is a boy, the others will have no choice but to act. She is too powerful already, can't you see? Perhaps the child will not survive. Accidents happen. Hurrem herself, though, moved through the palace with the serene confidence of a queen who knew she was untouchable, or at least wanted everyone to believe she was. But she could see it in their eyes, the sharpened curiosity, the quick glances at her stomach, the smiles that hid calculations. In the evenings, Suleiman visited her chambers more frequently, lingering longer. His attention to her during pregnancy was obvious, and it only deepened the other women's resentment. If the child was a girl, the tension might ease, temporarily. But if it was a boy, it wouldn't just shift the balance of power. It could trigger a chain reaction, alliances forged in the dark, poison slipped into cups, and plans for accidents that would never be spoken of in daylight. And so, long before the baby even drew his first breath, Hurrem's unborn child was already the most dangerous person in the Ottoman court. The law of fratricide. In the glittering halls of Topkapi Palace, the crown was not just a symbol of power, it was a weapon. And the greatest weapon in the Ottoman arsenal wasn't a sword or a cannon, it was a law. The law of fratricide. It was simple and terrifying. When a prince became sultan, all of his brothers could be executed, not for crimes they had committed, but simply because they existed. The idea was brutal but practical. It was designed to prevent civil war, because in an empire that stretched across 3 continents, even a hint of a succession dispute could tear it apart. And so, the price of the throne was blood. History offers chilling examples. In 1595, Mehmed III ascended to the throne. That very night, 19 of his brothers, some mere children, were strangled with silk cords in the palace. Silent, efficient, their small bodies were carried out under the cover of darkness, and the empire woke up to a new sultan and an empty nursery. Everyone in the palace knew this rule. It was not a secret. It was a shadow that followed every royal birth. Every new prince meant another potential execution, another red X on the mental death list of the dynasty, which is why Hurrem Sultan's pregnancy sent ripples of panic through the court. If her child was a boy, he would be another rival in the deadly game of succession, a rival who might one day wear the crown and sign the death warrants of the other princes. For the mothers of Suleiman's existing sons, this was not a distant, abstract fear. It was personal. A baby in Hurrem's arms could mean a noose around their own child's neck. Whispers in the harem became sharper, colder. Eunuchs exchanged glances in the corridors. Every smile aimed at Hurrem was tinged with calculation. Every polite word dripped with poison. This was not about motherhood. It was about survival. In the Ottoman palace, the joy of a new life was always shadowed by the knowledge that it could demand other lives in payment. And in that moment, before anyone even knew the child's gender, the law of fratricide was already at work, silently rearranging alliances, sharpening daggers in the dark, and setting the stage for a future drenched in royal blood. Visual. An animated Ottoman family tree appears on screen. With each birth, a new branch grows, but in the next frame, red X marks slash through the faces of other princes. The tree doesn't grow, it bleeds. The rival princes. At the top of the list stood Prince Mustafa, the eldest son of Suleiman, born of Hurrem Sultan. Handsome, charismatic, a brilliant military commander. The people adored him. The soldiers swore by him. If Suleiman died tomorrow, Mustafa would almost certainly inherit the throne, which meant if Hurrem's child was a boy strong enough to claim that crown, Mustafa would be his most dangerous obstacle, and also his most likely victim. But Mustafa was not alone. Suleiman had other sons, Seytsad Mehmed, Seytsad Selim, and Seytsad Bayezid, each with their own allies, their own ambitions. They shared blood, but not trust. The palace raised them to be scholars, warriors, and statesmen, but never brothers in the truest sense. From the moment they could walk, they were groomed not just to lead, but to compete. Training sessions in the palace gardens looked like friendly sparring matches, but every strike carried the weight of future battles. Feasts in the royal hall sparkled with music and laughter, but beneath the smiles, their eyes measured each other like predators, circling the same prey. Because in the Ottoman dynasty, there could be only one sultan, and the law of fratricide ensured that when one brother wore the crown, the others would wear shrouds. Visual: a montage of young princes training with swords in the courtyard, riding horses at full speed, and sitting together at banquets. But each glance is sharp, each smile forced. The frame freezes briefly on their faces, hinting at the blood that may one day stain them. The storm begins. In the summer heat of the palace gardens, the cry of a newborn split the air. Hurrem Sultan had given birth to a son. His name was Selim. The moment the news spread, the atmosphere inside Topkapi shifted, subtly at first, then like a tremor rolling under the marble floors. For Hurrem's supporters, this was a triumph, a sign from God that her influence over Suleiman was not only secure, but expanding. Another son meant another chance at shaping the future of the empire. But for the supporters of Prince Mustafa, it was a warning shot. They understood the brutal arithmetic of Ottoman succession. Every new prince was another rival, another threat that had to be dealt with before the crown could be claimed. And Mustafa's crown had just become harder to reach. The court divides. Almost overnight, the palace split into two camps. On one side stood Mustafa, backed by his mother Hurrem Sultan, the Janissary Corps, and much of the empire's military elite. Mustafa was the people's prince, a warrior who had already led troops in battle, who embodied the ideal of a strong Ottoman ruler. On the other side stood Hurrem Sultan, wielding not the sword, but the far deadlier weapons of court politics. Her ally, Rustam Pasha, was rising fast, a brilliant, ruthless statesman whose loyalty to Hurrem was absolute. Between them stretched a network of spies, informants, and whisperers, moving through the harem and the council chambers like smoke. Letters were passed in the shadows. Promises were traded for favors. And everywhere, people began to choose sides. Seeds of paranoia. Suleiman, the sultan at the center of it all, was not blind to the tension. He saw the way Mustafa's popularity grew with every military victory. He heard the whispers in the harem that painted Hurrem as a sorceress, using dark charms to bend his will. And now, with Selim's birth, the whispers grew louder. She will not stop until her son wears the crown. The irony was that the birth of one small child, a baby swaddled in silk, barely able to lift his head, was already shaping the fate of the greatest empire in the world. The battle lines are drawn. The rivalry didn't erupt overnight in bloodshed. It began with appointments. Hurrem and Rustam maneuvered to place their allies in key positions, governors, viziers, even tutors for the princes. Mustafa's camp did the same. Every decision became a test of loyalty. Every ceremony, every festival, a chance to display power. Outwardly, the palace maintained its glittering facade, banquets, poetry readings, religious festivals. But behind the walls, it was a chessboard, and every piece was being moved toward an inevitable clash. The shadow of the law. Everyone in both camps understood the unspoken truth. When the time came, the law of fratricide would decide their fate. If Mustafa became sultan, Selim's life would be forfeit. If Selim, or one of Hurrem's other sons, rose to power, Mustafa would not live to see the coronation. The princes themselves could not ignore it. They were raised in the same palace, shared the same tutors, sometimes even sat side by side at family banquets. But each knew the other might one day be their executioner. And so, the storm gathered, quietly, steadily, unstoppable. The first cracks. The first open signs of hostility came in the provinces. Reports from governors loyal to Mustafa began to contradict the official dispatches reaching Suleiman. Taxes were delayed. Troops were reassigned without the Sultan's order. Each small act of defiance was another signal. The empire was already fracturing. Hurrem answered with her own counter-moves, arranging marriages, forging alliances with foreign envoys, ensuring that her sons would be seen not just as princes, but as the heirs the empire needed. The tension built like a drumbeat, each move and counter-move bringing them closer to the moment no one could avoid. The hook for what comes next. It would not happen tomorrow, or next month, but the path was set. Somewhere in the gilded halls of Topkapi, a prince would die, and his death would be remembered not just as a tragedy, but as a turning point that shook the empire to its core. Because when two princes want the same throne, only one walks away alive.